Dudes to Dads is a podcast to help men understand and navigate the transition of being a single dude into a family man. How do we make sense of it all? Well, we probably won't be able to, but let's go ahead and have some fun trying.
And we are back.
We are back.
I'm Jason Kreidman.
I'm Alan Bush.
And this is Dudes to Dads.
Dudes to Dads.
It's the whispering Dudes to Dads.
It's the very subdued Dudes to Dads. Hi.
Or we can talk normal.
The Bob Ross
Either
Dudes
way.
to Dads. Happy little trees.
How are you doing?
Great. Feeling very Bob Rossy.
I don't know what accent that was. But
How are you doing?
yeah.
Yeah,
Episode 135. No, we do not make voices and talk strange for those of you who are joining us for the first time.
I actually do. But not on the show.
We do. We do a lot, actually. But today's episode is very, very crucial to the development of your child. And so dads, take heed.
Take heed.
How to help your child make new friends.
Yeah.
Now, the reason we can be listening to this is because either one, your child is really social and likes to make new friends, which is probably not the case.
Yeah.
Or the opposite, meaning maybe your child is having a little bit of difficulty.
Sure.
Now, that difficulty can be caused by other children. It can also be caused by your own child.
Yes.
That's what we've got to look at.
You really have to evaluate whether or not it's them or it's people around them.
And so now this could apply to a little bit older children because, if you have a child that's quiet or such, maybe a little reserved, they might be less inclined to make the effort themselves. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm talking for the most part about younger children. And maybe as what I was thinking in my head when I was creating this was really when they start creating the friendships really about kindergarten. That's kind of when you start interacting a lot more with people.
Yeah, because you're put into social situations just by proxy of being in their class or whatever those things are.
Totally. And in fact, a lot of the relationships that they develop at that is really related to proximity. I mean, that's actually what I just said. It's they're in the same class. They're in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
They're in the same after school program or sports or music or whatever. It's because they're in there.
I have 3 friends I can talk to right now that I literally was in the same neighborhood with.
Yeah.
And it's because they're such a part of your kind of fabric of your childhood. Mm-hmm. Some of them carry over. And thankfully we kind of grew parallel to each other in context of who we were as people.
No, it's really cool to see a bond that develop. I mean, I honestly even.
You have a couple friends.
I've got 4, 5 friends that are all from my childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple have been on the show, right?
Yeah. We're all great friends still.
Yeah.
And that's really cool when you see, and granted, that's elementary school-ish,
Yeah.
But it's just cool to see as a parent, it's cool to see your child bond with other kids and really get along. And especially when you see a child that matches up really well with them and they, I wouldn't say the word push, but they're doing things that are positive. They're helping each other.
Yeah.
They're you can see that there's a reciprocal nature of the friendship versus you see sometimes where it just does not mesh well.
Yeah.
And you have to recognize that. I mean, it could be your child and it could be the other child. It just might not be a good fit. And as an example, if your child's really shy, they may or may not mesh with other shy children.
Right.
You have to test that out. It might be that maybe it's a younger child that they get along with.
I speaking as a shy child, I didn't have too many problems making friends, but I was really repellent of loud, aggressive kids. Mm-hmm. And loud, aggressive kids, they weren't necessarily bad. They just were loud and aggressive, and I just didn't really jive well with them. And so and people who were really kind of a hyper testosterone-y,
Yeah.
And so if I was around a lot of that, I probably wouldn't have a lot of friends at that point.
Yeah, and that's something to recognize as the parent. It's what's going well with your child, or I should say, what are the aspects of the other children that mesh well that you like? Mm-hmm. That's the part. Do you see that, okay, this other child is polite, or this other child seems to be, they take turns when they're doing stuff, or, there's a mutual friendship, not just my child's bossing this other child around or vice versa.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot. Like with that child, they're totally different than with the other one, you know, and you just see that. And so you see what meshes. So, I think it's important. And sort of the number one thing is we get into, some things that you can do to help out. And that's kind of what the purpose of this podcast. The first thing is you need to be proactive. So sitting on the couch isn't going to do much. It's kind of like dating. You know, it's not going to happen if you just sit on the couch. Same thing.
You don't have Tinder for kids?
Actually, they probably do.
They probably have Playmates or something like
totally.
that.
Playdate.com.
Playdate.com.
That's wrong.
That's terrible.
Nothing's going to happen by doing nothing. So, you know, the idea is you kind of have to develop that in your mind first. Like, okay, I think I'm going to have to take an active approach. Now, I'm going to guess that a lot of times that comes from the mom, but I think the dads need to step in. And I mean, not all the time. I mean, I see that with my children's friends and, you know, the dads will step in. But by and large, a lot of the early play dates, especially kindergarten and such, is moms, you know. So it's nice to, you know, for the dads to step up. I think we have our own desire and sense of what we like our children to be around. And that may or may not be the same as your wife,
right?
You know, some of it could be, well, I want my kid to be more active, or I want my kid to, be more social and, you know, and don't want them sitting behind the video games or whatever it is. Now you have to be careful. These are things that we want.
Sure.
So you have to put that in check with what your child wants.
Right.
But still at that age, we're still guiding them in a direction. So the second thing, discuss the qualities that make a good friend. So this is where you get the chance to talk with your child and get input from them. You know, talk about things like honesty and being kind and having fun, and ask them what kind of qualities they value. Like, what is it that you want in a friend? And, you know, and they'll say things like, well, I want them to play what I want to play, you know, or I want to be able to walk over to their house, you know, whatever. I mean, it could be a bunch of good things, bad things, things that make sense, things that don't make sense, but allow them that input. What kind of people do they want in their life?
Yeah. And kind of going back to maybe even last episodes about how the values that you teach them, you know, the 9 values we talked about last episode, it's like, if you convey that to them, then they'll probably look for that in the people that they're around them as well.
Right.
You know, and they'll carry that over. I know, like, my grandmother would always comment, like, you always had such good friends. You know, she'd always make that comment because, you know, the things that I valued, I didn't want to surround myself with bad people. And I don't want my grandparents to be unhappy with the people that I would bring home to hang out. So therefore,
and sometimes that happens where, you know, it's unintentional, but, you know, the bad kid could be exciting, you know, and if your child is like, oh, well, they get into mischief, or, you know, they're really act like they love to just, you know, hunt or what, you know, something. It could be, you know, all different things about how they play. Of course, I mean, I'm thinking of a lot of this comes to mind with boys. Because I was just at a boys camp out. That's why.
I know you're full of testosterone.
Right
now.
Like it was just, you know, 100 boys and dads running around. It's like Planet of the Apes and like, you know.
Kill the pig.
Yeah.
It's like Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies. Exactly. So that's kind of what's in my mind, you know, not thinking about my daughter. Right. But yeah, you want to talk with them and ask them what's the qualities that they want to have in their friends and what's important. So that's an important one. Number 3, provide positive reinforcement. So when you do see good stuff happening with their friends, you're going to want to point that out maybe and just say, hey, I saw, you know, you and Sarah were sharing your dolls back and forth, you know, or, you know, you and Sam were really playing well together, you know, or something like that, and just reinforcing that positive behavior. And part of that is just like with any sibling rivalry or any, you know, behavior that they have, you want to reinforce the positive behavior that they're having around their friends. So, you know, and a lot of that could be as simple as, hey, you were really polite when you had your friend over. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
You know, just little things like that. It's really important. And that's going to just reinforce and cause them essentially to continue that behavior when they get that reinforcement.
Yeah, right. And develop it outside of the house as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Next thing, offer them some conversation or playing tips. Now, you got to be careful here, especially with the age of the child, because as they get older, they don't want to hear from you. But when they're a little bit younger, you could say things like, hey, when you're with your friends, do you ask them questions or are they asking you questions? And you want to sort of help them understand what good interaction is. Hey, do you usually play what your friend wants to, or do you tell them what to do? Or maybe you guys can switch off and you're doing something for 15 minutes and then they get to do, and like giving those kinds of things when you're not in the heat of it. It's like having that conversation at dinner or having that conversation at a different time when they're not actually playing with their friend.
Right.
So that's something too that can help and offer them. You just have to be a little conscious of how much information you're trying to push onto them.
Yeah.
The next thing, schedule play dates. So it's funny, they call them play dates now, which, back when I was a kid, I don't remember it being called, it's just called play.
But I don't remember being on a play date.
That's what they call them now.
Yeah, well,
so it's like, hey, can I have a play date with X?
They really call
that's
it
what they call it. That's what they call them. I don't remember that either.
Hey, just go play.
Yeah, we just went and played. Okay, what if his name?
Come over and so and so come. Yeah.
Now can he have a play date?
Really?
Yeah, that's what they call them.
I'm not calling it that.
Well, get used to it.
Against the grain.
So you want to try setting up some times to play with different children, but only one at a time. I'm not a big fan of like multiple children play dates. Once in a while, it's fine. Especially, but when you're experimenting with new kids, it's not as, desirable, if you will, because you don't get a chance to really see the interaction. You see the interaction in a group setting. And group play is much different than individuals.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's totally different.
Yeah.
And so, try different personalities. You'll begin to see, who your child gets along with. Now, as I said, it's not always, the person that they're getting along with isn't always the desired friend,
right.
that you desire. So, just because they're getting along with them doesn't mean that they're a good influence on each other,
Right.
Because that'll happen too, where, I will say boys, and I've known this from other parents as well, to say like, the boys will be really good friends and they have a lot of energy, but then when they get into the class, they're essentially a disturbance to the class.
Right.
They're talking. And that's just because they have energy. They like each other. They're, and that happens. And it happens with girls too. It's like, so you got to be careful of those kinds of situations,
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, you want them to like the people and hopefully you like the people too. So you're setting up play dates with people that you anticipate would be okay with you. You have an awareness of the child, or the parent, or
right. Oh, I guess that was my question. Is that do you get these play dates from other parents or people that you know? Because, when you're in a neighborhood that is conducive where there's a bunch of kids around, or at least a small handful of kids around, you kind of just naturally meet people walking around. And, I don't think anyone
most of it's from school.
Well, yeah, no one actively. Well, I knew a kid that down the street that wasn't in my age group. He was like a couple years younger than me. And we became good friends just because he was like 2 houses down. We were just walking outside one day and we're like, hey, how are you? And then somehow I was walking by or something happened. We became friends. So, but like when it's kind of planned as a date, is it the parent or parents setting this up?
Yeah. Most of the time,
there's no website, like we said.
Yeah, no. Most of the time it is. I know with our situation, there's a couple things that happen. There's the suggestion from us of saying, "Hey, what do you think of a play date with XYZ?" Because maybe we were talking to their parent and we said, hey, like they
have the same age kid.
Yeah, let's see if they both have an interest in XYZ.
Right.
The other is your child will come to you and say, can I have a play date with blah, blah, blah on Friday? And she'll say, okay, well, I'll talk to their parents and figure out. Now, there are times, certainly, and especially in like the beginning of the year or something, now that they've been there at the school for a while, you kind of know most of the parents, at least, by face or by name or something. But oftentimes it will, there are parents that you don't know, but they are the kids' friends, and then you introduce yourself. Hi, I'm, whatever. And then, I guess our kids want to play together.
Yeah, right.
And so then that's kind of how it happens. So, It's an interesting dynamic. for
Yeah,
sure.
and I guess it's similar to how I was thinking how I grew up. Like I had a friend that lived in the same neighborhood, and we met in school, but then he moved to that neighborhood, and then I was like, "Hey, we're the kid from school," and then we became really close friends. But then he moved out of that neighborhood into a kind of a further away neighborhood. So my grandparents or my mom, when she moved in, basically had to drive me to their place because I didn't have a car. I was a little kid, and I couldn't walk there. So but luckily the parents kind of knew each other. Oh, that's Alan's family, or this is Chris's kids, or whatever it is, family. So it's not that much in that context. It's just weird to call it a play date, I guess. I'm like still stuck on that.
Yeah, I think what's interesting too, you brought up is although it's like the proximity, I think back in the day, let's say when we were kids, almost all the kids, at least I can remember in my neighborhood, we all went to the same school.
Yeah.
That's not the case anymore. There's charter schools, private schools.
Yeah,
so there's a lot. So
thing.
I will say most of the kids in our neighborhood that are my son's age all go to different schools.
That's weird.
It is weird, but we go to a school now because we have we're in the bilingual program, but it's still close by, but it's not our main school that we would go. So it's a little bit farther. And so then there's just, there's kids that go to a private school, kids that go to a charter school, kids that go to, and so they're not all, there's not a ton of kids, but just let's say within the street or couple streets over. I'm not saying like within the entire large neighborhood, but close by, if you will. Yeah, they all go to different schools, so they don't see each other. It's not like, hey, we can go home, back and forth with each other.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's just an interesting dynamic because I remember when I grew up, it's like all 20 kids that were in the neighborhood went to the same school.
Well, yeah, exactly. With maybe one or two exceptions, but you're right. I think all of the kids I knew in my neighborhood were in the same school. It might be different age groups slightly, but we all went to the same school.
Totally.
And so,
it's interesting.
It is funny.
Next thing, keep your expectations in check. So you never want to force the child to have a play date, but you can certainly encourage it. Also, don't make a huge deal of it. I think it needs to be sort of in casual conversation. It's not like, you know what, you don't seem to have many friends, or you know what, you need some new friends. You're not wanting to say things like that, obviously,
right.
But still I need to say it. So you just really need to be aware as well. If you're not getting asked to reciprocate the play dates, then you have to respect that. And kind of be aware of that maybe the other kid is not wanting to play with your kid.
Right.
And that's really hard too when your child doesn't want to play with the other child and they keep asking.
Right.
At a certain point, it's like, how many times do you ask?
Yeah.
But it's, here's the thing. It's like looking at it at a higher level. You're not going to want to be the one who's doing that.
Right.
Like that's your kid's friend or not friend. So ideally, it's like you'd want them to settle it at that part. Like, listen, hey, but that's really hard for a kid to do.
It is.
To say like, no, I'm not interested.
Yeah, it's kind of learned.
But that can happen where, the child just is like, no, I don't really like playing with them. Like they're not very nice or, and that'll happen.
Yeah.
So, and it could be vice versa where the other child is like, listen, I don't have a good time when I'm with that child. And it's your child that
your
they don't want to play
kind of
with.
A punk. I don't really want to talk to him.
So you kind of just have to accept that, and sometimes that is not easy.
Right.
So I've heard. It's not my everybody loves my children.
Sure.
No, I've never had any issue whatsoever. Hi, kids. The other thing, or it's kind of the last thing, is just be aware if there is a real problem. So, be mindful of that if your child really does have problems with other kids, and this is more serious, consider possibly getting professional help. Don't try to always solve it on your own. Because, it could be something that you're missing and a professional could discover it. And here's the reality. It could be something that you're doing wrong, or as the parent, it's like you're not recognizing the fact that your child is having this difficulty. So you got to really watch that. And especially if you find that, you're going through friends a lot, nobody seems to be keeping, they seem to be, shuffling through and there's nobody that seems to be reciprocating that.
Right.
what could be going on? Because there could be some behavioral issue. There could be, sometimes, I don't know, but I'm just saying like, an only child is going to behave different possibly than somebody who is used to, this is more when they're really little. Like, an only child who's like a toddler.
Yeah.
Is more inclined to just maybe be a little bit more selfish with their toys or whatever because they just don't know and they haven't had to
never learned any social behaviors. Yeah.
I mean that when you get a little bit older that doesn't happen, but those are the kinds of things as a parent and as a dad you've got to be mindful of. So
sure. Yeah.
So anything else? Any other major
issues?
Major issues, and just to be aware that if your child is wanting to make friends, you're going to have to make some effort.
Yeah. I was joking earlier about this, but go outside, man. That's kind of one of the things.
Go outside.
Go out there and literally.
But that would have been a very short podcast.
No, we couldn't just say that. But that's my contribution to this whole thing is that I know for the when I was a kid, it wasn't play date. What are you talking about?
Or just play online and be friends with someone in a different country.
Digitally. Yeah. And no, it's important to just kind of socialize and just kind of go out there and put yourself out there. But it's hard, especially when you if you're new or you're into a new school or that type of thing. A lot of things can happen with that. But those are good tips. I think that
and one that I left out that it just made me think of is to join an organization. And that's the other thing is if you're having trouble, whether it be sports, music, arts, anything like that, that's a really good way to be exposed to some, because maybe they're not getting along with some of the kids at school for whatever reason, or they don't feel comfortable. I mean, that, they just don't feel like they have stuff in common, and maybe they really like playing something or doing something. And so, getting them maybe involved in a group that does that could easily be, something
that helps out a lot.
So that could be. So if you have any suggestions, Alan, what should they do?
Email us, podcast@dudesdads.com, or hit us up on social media, Twitter @dudesdads, Facebook dudesdads.com. You can go to YouTube, Dad University and Dudes to Dads are both up there. Some great videos by Jason on Dad University, and then the Dudes to Dads podcast also is up there as well. Subscribe to those channels if you can, and then more importantly, go to the podcatchers. Apple is iTunes. I keep calling it iTunes, but I think it's Apple Podcasts now. I don't know. It changes everything.
That's why I leave this to you.
Thank you. And Stitcher, the two main ones that we're on. Please, Google Play. Actually, I forgot about that
Google Play.
But go to the two main ones and subscribe and leave some comments. It really helps perpetuate the show and gives us some incentive to keep doing this every week.
Right on. All right. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
And we will see you next time.
See you next time.